Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Art, Money, Success podcast. My name's Maria Brophy. I am your host. Today, we are going to talk about something that kind of sometimes strikes the fear into the hearts of the creative people that I know. And I want to ask you, does this happen to you? When you hear someone like me talk about you need to file your copyrights, does it just kind of it's like somebody stabbing you in the stomach because it just kind of strikes fear in you because you know you haven't been doing it? Well, I just want you to know you are not the only one. I too am very guilty of not filing the copyrights when I should. As a matter of fact, I have a number of images that have been in use for quite some time that have been nagging at me because I have not filed the copyrights. So I have a special guest for you today, and my guest is an attorney that loves and cares about artists very much, and she does a lot of work in the copyright realm. I say she cares about artists very much. I think she cares about artists as much as I do. And I don't know too many people out there that share so much information. And so anyway, my guest is Tammy-Browning Smith. I'm going to bring her on in just a moment. She is getting her live stream set up. And while we're waiting, I just want to let you all know that this is being recorded live, and those that are here with us live can ask questions in the comments, and I will address those questions. So I'm going to have a ton of questions for Tammy, and let's bring her on right now. There she is. Hi, Tammy. How are you?
Hi. Hanging in. How are you all?
Can't hear you. Let's see. Oh, can't hear you because of me. It's probably not you. Hold on. I just realized something. Wait a minute. Bear with me. I sometimes forget that I need to put my headphones if I'm going to hear my guest. All right. Here we go. Okay. Tammy, now I can hear you. Hello.
Greetings.
Greetings. I am so grateful to have you on today. Because,
it's my honor.
Well, and you and I have talked about copyrights before, and we've talked about, we've talked about so many things. And when I get on the phone with you, I swear I could talk to you for 5 hours.
I know.
And we're not going to do that today. I promise I won't do that to you today. But I do have a number of questions for you.
Okay.
Having to do with copywriting art. And we have an audience of artists and writers and creative people. And so one of the, let's see. Well, first of all, before we jump into my questions, can you just like really simply explain what it means to copyright your artwork?
Okay. What it means to copyright artwork. So, it's important to note, and it's so easy to, how do I say this? It's so easy to get things confused about what is a copyright versus what's a trademark. Because copyrights in their own, copyrights, it's possible to actually have two of the three. So a copyright is available to a fixed, tangible expression. And that fixed part is very important. So why that matters and why we then go into registration is having a copyright on it, because there's, to be honest, there's everything, copyrights that happen for everything from, music to writing to sculptures to boat hull designs. So yeah. Just a little fun.
Didn't know that.
Yep. Architecture. So we have this whole amorphous creative world. And then also with copyright, you can have two people have the same thing. So Maria, you and I could have a camera, We could be both looking at the Washington Monument. We both can stand literally, in the same spot. We could do it at the same time, whatever, and take that picture, and we both would have the rights associated under copyright law.
Oh my gosh, I never thought of that.
So that's why, it's a fun. So that's why registration is important in the U.S. And now we're primarily here talking U.S. law. U.S. is very much a system, a proactive system. If you speak to most of our international friends, they will say, well, why do you write? We don't register them until there's a problem, usually. But in the U.S., it's a very proactive system. So because of that proactive system, registration matters. It's basically a deed to your house. Whenever people have trouble with concepts of what copyrights are or intellectual property, I say I started as a real estate attorney, and because of my creative interest, went back and came through. So copyright matters because it is the deed to your work. It's what you can prove. It's what you, if someone questions your work, if you need to prove it as a valuable asset, it's what makes it, in my world, valuable. It's what's that. It takes that sketch on the napkin and adds validity to it.
Okay. So to make it simple for those listening who aren't real familiar with copyrights, because I know the copyrights can kind of stress artists out because a lot of them are not filing them. And they're not filing them because it's not the easiest process. I mean, it's not the worst either, but it's also gets expensive. And just sitting down and figuring out how to do it. You got to block out. Like for me, when I'm sitting down trying to figure out something like that, I could block out 2 hours in my day. And who has that time, right? But it's important. So I'm going to give an example. A few years ago, an example of someone stealing my husband Drew's artwork. Okay. A few years ago, I got an email from a friend who said, oh my gosh, we didn't know Drew was putting his art on these sunglasses. And it was for a very large sunglass company. And I said, we're not putting art on sunglasses. I sure would like to. And so they sent me a copy of an advertisement that this company had been advertising online with Drew's art on their sunglasses. And immediately so because it was such a big company, this sunglass company, they're like this number 2 in the country, in the US. I thought, oh, this is big. I'm going to have an attorney help me with this. So I had an attorney send them a letter stating that they needed to cease and desist. And at the time, I have filed a lot of copyrights for Drew's art, but that particular piece of art that they stole was not copyrighted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but I'll tell you what happened. What ended up happening was my attorney sent them a letter. They realized that it was Drew Brophy's art. And they didn't steal it. What happened was another artist stole it and sold it to them. So they didn't want anything to do. They didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to be sued. They didn't want to deal with it. So they pulled all the product off the market. It probably cost them 6 figures or more because they already had a bunch of the product produced. I don't even know how much money they lost on it, but they lost a lot of money on it. And however, so let me ask you this question. Because we didn't file a copyright, and if they decided they wanted to fight us on it, and then we went to court over it, would that hurt us that we had never filed the copyright?
Well, and that's where you get to the second part of why copyright register, a robust for especially professional, a robust copyright registration program is important. Now, I will caveat all of this with, I think it was Monday, the Copyright Office is changing how they register copyrights. So probably here in the next 6 months, you're going to have a whole new screen and a whole new way to do it. The rights are still the law stays the same. They're just updating their entire registration and process. So they're trying to make it easier. There'll be a lot more pictures for us art people. But what is important with registration is creating that system. In the US, we still have a situation where you can't march into federal court, which is where most copyright, I would say 98% are filed, because federal courts have copyright jurisdiction, or jurisdiction over copyright law. You can't march into court unless you have that filed. There's even what happens a lot of time is, and I smile because it's always that one that you didn't register.
It always is. It's Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law.
You run into the situation where you're paying an $800 expedited fee. So now, instead of an $55 or $85 problem or registration fee, you're looking at $800 to $900, and that's if you do it yourself.
I missed something. So where does that $800 or $900 come in?
So you're looking at $55 to $85 to register the regular registration process.
Okay.
Plus, there's an expedited fee.
Oh,
so if you need it, so unless you want to wait 3 to 6 months or longer, and you need to file, that expedited fee is $800.
Okay, so going back to my story about the sunglass company. So let's say they answer my attorney's letter and says, sorry, we're going to keep selling them and try to stop us. So at that point, would I file after the fact and pay an expedited fee? Or am I opening a can of worms asking this question?
Well, no, here's the thing. If they said, too bad, see you in court, then you have your choice. Do nothing and let them do it. Yeah. And by the way, let's go back to the real estate analogy. If you own a home and you just let people squat in it, eventually you lose the rights to it.
Yes.
So then they forced your hand. Now, there are some new courts coming online and things like that may give you some other options. But right now, your option is, if you haven't registered it, and so you're going to want to sue them, you're going to want to stop. And you actually bring up a case where there is a financial incentive because of the size. Yeah. Sometimes you're not dealing with a size issue. You're dealing with somebody posting it online or whatever. However, if you want to, they throw their hands up and say, too bad, see you in court. The way you have to get into court, unless you want to wait 3 to 6 months, is that $800 expedited fee.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to bring up a question that one of our listeners asked. Her name's Sandra. Sandra, this is such a good question. Sandra wrote, I'm in the US, so I don't understand how anyone can afford to register every single painting or work they produce, particularly if the artist is prolific but not wealthy. And I feel your pain, Sandra, because Drew creates over 100 new pieces of art a year. And I know artists that create thousands because they're doing digital art and elements and so forth. So, and right now, my understanding is when you go to file a copyright, as of today, you can only file up to 10 images on one $55 application. Right?
If it's unpublished.
If you have not yet published it. If you've published it, then you can only file one image at a time, right?
Mm-hmm. Or there's some rules about, they use the game board analogy. So like you could register the game board to game in the pawns and all of that together. But as a general rule, for most what we're dealing with, it's one at a time.
Yeah.
If it's been published.
And so this is where I have a problem, because even though I've been okay with filing copyrights, but I went through a couple year period where I didn't file any.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I think I was just busy with kids and stuff.
Life happens. Yes.
I mean, being an entrepreneur, I'm doing the job of like 12 people, and there's and sometimes something has to give. So if it's not on fire, sometimes you just ignore it. Well, I realize now that there's a number of images that we have not filed copyrights for, and they are published and they are popular. So
keep talking. Yep. So here,
what's the answer to that?
So here is the challenge. Now, we need to take photographs out for a minute. If you are, especially a photographer, and you're prolific, I mean, come on, we can, with one click, you can do that pretty quickly. So yes, I am telling you what I just heard is what most of my clients run into. First off, the 100, 100 a year, or 100 a month, or 100 a day. And especially if you only have 10 that you can register at a time, that's another problem. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we're going to speak as if it's about like the artwork back over your shoulder. Mm-hmm. In your case, Maria. So that's where we're going to go, because if you're doing sticker sets and things, we can play a little bit. But let's just talk single image artwork for a minute here.
Okay.
And we're talking 2D, one painting, one book, we're talking primarily visual here. Music is another thing. We'll just leave that for another day. How do we get around it? What do you do? Some people choose to pick their best works. The ones, if you haven't registered for years, the ones that are the most popular, and they register them individually. Some people just leave it and start from scratch. Just say, okay, those 2 years, it is what it is. There are others, and who have done so successfully, used what's called, in my world, I call it the photograph exception. You can register no more than 750 photographs at a time under a group registration on one application.
And how much is that one application?
That's your $55 to $85. Application fees still happen. And I'm going to double check that to make sure. I haven't checked recently.
So for photographers, so you can file 700 up to 750 separate images on one application.
Yes, published photographs. So here is where we
published. Wow.
Published photographs. Yes.
Why do they do that? Why are they so good to photographers and not the artists?
As I love my friends that specialize in the photography world. Sorry when I say this, sometimes I just say they have a really good lobbying organization. No, seriously, the people at the Copyright Office, the people that handle, I want to be very clear on one thing as we talk about this. The professionals that run the Copyright Office are the best in the world. And they really do, working through these different processes, really try their hardest to find a balance. And so they come up with a balance, and then those of us who don't fit in that balance have to come up with some options. So here is what I call the novel educational approach. So Maria, I always say this, you and I are having an educational discussion. This is not legal advice per se. We're having a legal educational discussion, and we're just, chatting about art. If you think about it, the majority of the work, when things get stolen these days, they get stolen online.
Yep.
Now, for example, if I were to steal that paint, Drew's painting behind you, I'm assuming that's Drew's behind you.
Yes, it is.
I've never seen that original work. I'm in Delaware, you're in California. I'm seeing a photograph of it, or a visual, a photograph. So there are some in our industries that take photographs of their images and register under the photograph exception, with the argument being that really what's being stolen is a photograph of the art and not the art itself.
That makes perfect sense to me, because we do photograph every single image before it leaves. So technically, it's a photograph. So what I could do, if I have 40 new images, I can photograph them, which I do anyway. Nothing leaves this gallery without being photographed.
Right.
And I can file those under the photography application. Group registration.
Of published photographs.
Okay. I like that.
Now, that's the big thing. There's we can spend a good hour or so, because there's a wonderful, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see, is there a way, I think here in the comments, I'm going to see if I can put, I don't know, am I allowed to put them in the comments?
You should be able to put something in the comments. Yeah.
Or you know what I'm going to do? Maria, I'm going to put it in the private chat and then have you put it in.
Okay.
There's a whole entire web page from the Copyright Office on it, because there are very specific ways that you have to upload those images. Now, I want to be clear on a couple of things here.
Okay.
95% of all lawsuits filed in federal court, this is just a rough number, are settled before they ever go to pretrial. Within the 95% of them settle before they go to verdict. That's rough, super rough numbers. Nothing, but what I'm trying to say is, majority of the cases are settled, just like your letter. The good old, I call them Tammy love letters, but cease and desist letters, yours, but why that matters is the majority of the time you just need to prove your artwork. If you're filing to get something taken down. So if you have a registration number and a legitimate registration of that picture, you've done what you need to do.
Yeah.
Now this is where each situation's different, where we have situations where you may need to pull one of those 750 out. There are some jurisdictions that would say, well, if they only violate, say you put all 750 in. And by the way, if you put 750 pictures or photographs and register it, you're not going to get it back within 3 to 6 months. They're going to take a little longer.
But I have a question about that. So you're saying it can take 8 months or longer to get the registration, but registration is usually effective the day they receive it.
It is effective the day they receive it. You just won't receive your certificate or the ability to be able to march into court until you actually receive a number. You see that registration number. And so and especially why those numbers come important as well, especially for our prolific friends that do a lot of graphic works. A lot of times you're filing Digital Millennium Copyright Act notices, takedown notices. Or if you've ever filed, with eBay or even an international one, they're always looking for that registration number. And so that's why that helps.
Yeah.
But it's important to note in court and in some jurisdictions, like I said, if you go to verdict, there could be a statement that says, well, you have 750 for 750 images, you only get 1/750th of what you could take, or you could do.
Oh,
rare.
Oh my gosh, there are so many things to know.
Yeah, there is. But it's important to note the majority, it's better than nothing, first off.
It's totally
better
agree.
than nothing. And
the most I've ever fought back in the good old days when you could file up 50 images at a time. That was the most I ever filed, was 50 at a time, because it was just too much work. And, so, all right. So here's another question. And I'm going to preface it with, okay, Amber asked, what's the definition of published? And for those of you who might have missed this earlier, when you file a copyright registration, if you file art that is unpublished, you can file a group of images up to 10. If you file published, you have to file it individually. So this is a great question, Amber. What is the definition of published? Tammy, can you give us a list of what considers published? Is it social media? Like if you put it on social media, is it published?
Okay, I'm going to do two things. I had this, I do these, so if you see something, wait for a second. I just published what the, I want to make sure. Pardon me just a second here. I'm in the chat. You're going to see what the technical definition is, but I'm going to give you the short definition. Basic, first off, it has to be in its final form. Okay.
In its final form? What does that mean?
Final form. So that means if, you know how we all have works in progress? Completed. Yep. Okay, so that's the first part. It has to, we have to make sure it's final, and by the way, it's going to come. So the real trick is, I always tell people, the safest rule of thumb is it's the date that it is made available to the public. Now, made available to the public, is that offer to sale? It's for sale? Is that first time you put it up on your Facebook page and said, look what I just finished? That is still to be decided.
So that's still up in the air, like they haven't.
Yeah, because there's so many. So for example, I will tell you, in patent law, the first time you show it or display it to the public, the trigger starts. Not necessarily, that's not the case here in copyright law. And because it depends on the type of work, it depends on what you do with the work. There are many of us that sometimes just create stuff and put it up, but we never sell it. So if you use the first, made it available for publication, what does that do? What if you have Drew's work and you just put it in, you're putting it in the gallery, but you're going to keep it in a public, as a private collection?
Yeah.
So it depends on, some of it depends on what you're doing. The safest rule is the first time you publish, the first time you show it to the world in final form. That's the safest rule. Then, depending on a bunch of different scenarios, will then allows you the opportunity to figure out when that might change. Usually, like I said, but the safest rule is the first time it's been shown in public, but like I said, if you're just showing it, but not offering it for sale, that's one thing. But yet if you do offer for sale, so truly publication, there's the safest rule, and then there is, how do I put it? It's one of those, how good is your attorney? Because if you're getting into this type of argument, you're then getting into other issues involved. And that's why I made sure to put up, and Maria, I think hopefully you got it in our comments so you can publish it for everyone.
Yeah, I did. I reposted.
So that you can see there's, public performance. You look at if it's public performance, the display. And one of the things, and it's always very clear, and that's what I said, the display of a work does not itself constitute a publication. So just because you put it out there in the world does not necessarily, are you planning on distributing it? However, remember I just said the safest rule is the first time you offer it to the public, because there's also the argument that is made, first time I'm showing it out to the public, it may not be available for sale for 6 months. However, I did show it to the public.
Well, the challenge with that is in today's world, with Instagram and everything, we're posting pictures of stuff every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening. And if I'm not filing copyrights every day, and I wanted to, when we post pictures on Drew's Instagram, it's what's happening today, right now. It's not what happened a month ago. What happened a month ago, we've moved on from. So,
well, the good news is when it comes to incentives to register, the good news is you have the ability to take advantage of some of those statutory benefits up to 3 months from publication. Or there's even arguments.
So up to 3 months. So
after you published is usually that we call them their safe harbor provisions. So, if you published on January 1st, anything you've done, up until, so you published on January 1st, anything you've done up until March 31st will give you as long as you publish or you file, it would be published, it would be a published work, but you would file within those 3 months. It does allow you the ability to be able to still do things, because the other reasons you register in a timely manner is you get attorney's fees. And sometimes the attorney's fees are more than the actual damages.
So what you're saying is if you go to battle in court, somebody who stole your art, you win the case. If you didn't file your copyrights, you have to pay your attorney's fees, which could be ginormous. If you did file copyrights, then the other party, the party who lost, has to pay your attorney's fees.
Right.
Yeah, that's significant.
And here's the other thing with that. Like right now I have 2 cases going. One has timely registration, one doesn't. I mean, they're now both registered, but I have 2 different cases going right now. The other party, the one with the timely registration, is much more understands they could be responsible for a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And that's where you also get statutory damages, timely registration. I don't know, every so often you hear, wow, I can get up to $125,000 in statutory damages. That includes timely registration. So with those extra liabilities out there and a timely registration, you run into it's a much a stronger catalyst to get people to settle.
Yeah.
So that's another benefit of registration. So that's why we work really, really hard to try to find ways to get a system to help you, to be able to register. And I'm so fortunate. I get to work often with the Copyright Office because they do want to hear this, and they try all the time. So sometimes we just have to help them along.
So here's a question from Laura. She wants to know, is it true that an original painting shown in a gallery is exempt from the publication rule because it's not a copy? I've never heard that. That must be an urban legend, unless it's true.
Well, if it's shown, so I spoke about the gallery and Laura, I will say this to everyone, at the end of the day, and one of the reasons I do this is to answer questions. And so if we don't get to your questions today, Maria will give me a whole list or whatever, and I will do all I can to answer those questions. That's very important. Or if I don't answer it correctly, but correctly like what you're looking for, answer it in that way. So is it true that original paintings shown in a gallery is exempt from the publication rule because it's not a copy, I'm going to take that as meaning it's shown in the gallery, but there's nothing for sale. So in that situation, that was that rule as far as just because you display it doesn't mean it's a publication.
But if it's for sale,
meaning a copy,
then
but once again, we go, I'll put it to you this way. If you were my client, I'd be arguing that till the cows come home that yes, it's not a publication. It's just being shown. It's not being distributed. It's just sitting there. Yeah. If I'm on the other side, I'm going to be arguing, yes, but it is in a way, you may not be selling that one, but you're selling a derivative work of it, or you're selling the other one. So in a way, it's helping and aiding in the distribution, and it's part of the sale, the channel of sale. So that's why I said the safest is when we talk about publication and registration, is when you've shown it, when you've, when it's displayed in its final form. Now, I do want to say this for our digital friends. Layers can be separate copyrightable events. So if you take a layer off and that type of thing, so be cognizant. If you've got 10, if you've got 10 layers on a project and what's out is 8 of them, you technically haven't until you put all 10 on.
So, and that brings us to Nancy's question. What happens if you digitize the artwork and change the colors? So Drew has this really popular image called Sunrise, and it's bright colors. And we've talked about coming out with a version of Sunrise that's tones, like a brown. One would have brown tones, another would have blue tones. If somebody infringed on that, even though the colors are different, it's the same art. So would that first copyright not apply if we copyrighted the brightly colored one?
So part of the right part of copyrights is the bundle of rights that you get, and one of them is the ability to be able to create derivative works. So when you digitize those, so if you have a standard illustration and you digitize it, that same copyright falls into place. When you change the colors, it doesn't matter. The same copyright holds. Okay. Now, the technical question is, what happens if you haven't registered up until the point you digitize or whatever? Then you have to get a little more. You have to discuss that. You have to put that on your registration. But if you digitize the artwork, and say you even, when you're talking about Sunrise, say you just take elements out of it.
Yeah.
That original copyright still holds. It's called a derivative work.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. That's awesome. So I want to wrap this up, even though we might talk about this for another 10 minutes. Sorry, this comment's so big, it's kind of blocking out your face, Tammy, but Sandra wrote that she said, I lose my breath at the thought of this frequent chore. It gets in the way of our working time and inspiration moments, which is technically work time. So she's asking, are there people that you can hire to do your copyrights for you? I don't know of anybody, but wouldn't that be a great business for somebody to start?
Okay, so first off, that's the practice of law, the unauthorized practice of law to a point. So how do people do it if they don't have time to do it? And look, it's the same way with art licensing. It's any what I call business task. It's why we have accountants. So of course, I will honor my profession and say, if you don't want to register them, that's what we're here for. Is it more expensive? Of course it is. However, people who have repetitive systems can do it quicker. Like in my case, in my office, I have clients that's all we do is register. We register them. We have methods and systems in place. There are templates. Sometimes I register, like several of my clients, we spend an hour or two of time, we set up copyright templates that you keep online, because if you think about it, if you're doing the same type of work over and over again, all you're doing is changing names, maybe changing a date, but the rights and what you're declaring is the same. So there are options for that. I'm sorry?
Is that template in the copyright.gov system?
It is. It's both. So some of my clients store that template in the copyright.gov system. Some of them just have it right there setting. But a lot of times sometimes the copyright.gov system plays with it a little bit.
I know. Meaning
that you can't save certain ones. Most of them you can now, because when they do an update, that's the first thing I go and check. Having, there are systems for that. There are online legal services that do it. One of the most cost-effective things is you have to be careful hiring someone, but hiring someone in your office every quarter to come in. And now they have to be, this is where you don't want to get the unauthorized practice of law. They have to be like an employee or somebody through you. It's not like a service. It has to be an actual through you. And they just do it every quarter.
What about like a virtual assistant or something?
Yes, exactly. Like a virtual assistant. But those are the options available. Most of the time, if you do it every quarter, you're good, unless you know some of my clients that have like industry specific releases. Two of them in particular that I do a lot of work for as far as template work, I know there's conventions twice a year where they do releases. So I know 2 weeks beforehand, because let's get real. Most of us, unless you are manufacturing for your releases, if you have to release it July 1st, you're finishing the artwork and running to Kinko's to get stuff printed for the release at a convention or whatever, June 29th. So, those are the situations where then they set their own systems up for that. Especially in the giftware industries, where they know when their markets are, and they set up their own systems. They get some legal help to start, and then they set up their own system. Now, it's always funny because, like in my case with my clients that I work with templates on, usually they put my name down if there's a problem, So every so often, the copyright, I'll get an examiner. I call them examiners, who will call and say, "So you filed this, or there's 20 of them that are, that I have to discuss 20 of them," and I'm always like, let me get right back to you on that. But there are professionals who are willing to help you, but be very careful hiring a non-attorney service.
So but to hire an attorney service, what does that cost?
Well, and this is there's you get everything. I've seen them from $125 to $150, a registration. Yeah. There's, like I said, people that come in every quarter, like they basically hire a paralegal for a quarter, so they're paying them $25 an hour for however long it is. My clients that do templates for me, it's 1 or 2 hours of our time. We go through it online. We set you up your templates. You learn how to spot problems. But the key to it, no matter how you choose to do it, because your time is far more valuable creating instead of paying government fees, is setting up a system that works, asking other professionals. That's why you come to things like this. Look, I'm here to, however I can help you set up a system, even just as a courtesy, as far as answering questions like now, however you can set up that system to register. Because at the end of the day, what makes you more professional, what makes your work, it's just like building houses without having any sort of title to them.
So, all right. So I have a question. Drew just finished 5 commission paintings.
Mhm.
Like, and the way he works on paintings, he'll work on 5 of them all at the same time.
Yep.
And you can't file a copyright before it's finished because it's not finished. And now that they're finished, all the clients are paying for it.
Mm.
Do I have to file it at all these as published? I guess I do, right?
Well, yes and no. So this is where you set up your system. So in the case that you have those 5, he does them all 5 at once, or, he does the 5. That's when you say, okay, he's all done. And you register them, and then you sell them.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the registration has to be complete before it's published. I have done it happens where we'll register at midnight and they go on sale at 8:00 in the morning.
Okay.
Technically, you registered an unpublished work at the time.
Okay.
That's why I really make sure when I was talking about those types of publications and things where you do a little bit of planning my one client in particular, it saves thousands of dollars by just being able to do that, 6, 8, 10 hours before it's actually published.
Okay. So let's see. One last question. Is it ever too late to file a copyright?
No.
Okay.
Is it wise to file a late copy? If you're doing that, then the discussion needs to be had as far as why.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Drew did a piece of art in 1997 for a wakeboard company, and here it is. Here we are 25 years later, and this art is becoming popular again. And we are licensing it out for beer cans and other things, which is just so crazy. And I realized back in 1997, we didn't even know what a copyright was. I mean, we were just learning about all this stuff. So that's what I'm wondering. I mean, is it too late?
No, it is not. Anything prior to, I always say 1978 or 1976, you really need, because that is old law, and that we really need to have a discussion, and you need to have some specialties. If you're registering those, say 1990s work, and it happens all the time, we all know the world is cyclical, trends change. You would want to register that one, but then we might need to have a discussion about what registering the changes, so that those changes, which is probably now what the world is seeing, will fall under the benefits of the enhanced protection, the statutory damages and that type of thing. So if you're doing that type of strategy, we take a look. You can remember that whole derivative work thing. So those additions and things you might be able to have 2 registrations, 1990 and 2021. Especially we always look at that. Or sometimes you have to design smart. And that's the other thing with registrations and things like that. Sometimes what may not be available and what is available now, designing smart allows you that opportunity to take advantage of the law. Most people, especially, and that's why I always say when people ask me what is important, one of the things that's so important about when you want to get into art licensing or whatever is have mad computer skills or know somebody that does. I'm never saying fake it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just simply saying designing smart sometimes will allow you the opportunity to take advantage of some laws and things like that.
Okay. And I wanted to bring up Sandra's comment. Overwhelmed yet?
I'm sorry.
I want to address this because there are solutions out there, and I don't want artists to feel overwhelmed. And look, if you have never copyrighted your art and you maybe never will, don't the worst thing in the world that can happen is not really that horrible. The worst thing that could happen, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but I'm going to say the worst thing that can happen is some giant company steals your piece of art. They make a ton of money off of it and you can't do anything about it. That's like the worst thing that can happen, right?
Right. And there are people who are successful. There are people who are successful and never register. I can tell you right now that I have a client that makes 7 figures every year from licensing their artwork that doesn't register anything. And they only register if there's a problem. Like I said, some international people, that's how they always look at me strange when I say, are you registering your copyrights? And they're like, why? It's what's best for your business. And it's what is best. The good news about copyrights, and I see this several times over, is copyright registration does not have like annual renewal fees like trademarks or patents. You pay the fee once and you're done. So that's a good thing. But it's making the system that works. Yes, the rule of thumb is what usually gets stolen is the thing that wasn't registered, or it was that little last minute piece of artwork that you put out the door. But look, it just coming to this type of thing and asking questions of colleagues, what Maria offers to people in the resources and educational resources, that's how you don't make it so overwhelming. That's by asking those questions, by conversing, by utilizing important resources. I will tell you, as an attorney, I consider it a goal to make you more money than you spend on me. Those types of things. Sometimes spending an hour of time in an accountant, look how much in taxes you save. Sometimes finding, using resources. Now, Maria, do you do private consultations as well?
I do.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Spending that hour. That's what I was going to say. Sometimes spending before you go rushing to an attorney, to an accountant, spend some time with somebody in the business. Yeah. Ask those questions so then how to use the professional, the right way. That's always one of the seminars I'll do every so often is, how do you hire an attorney? How do you hire a professional? So that's how you don't make it so overwhelming. It's the more tools you have and the more knowledge.
So, and just to wrap this up, I want to suggest to artists out there that are feeling maybe a little like this is a lot to digest, as Johnny Spa wrote here. Hi, Johnny.
Sorry. I feel bad.
Well, it is for creative people because we just want to create. We don't want to deal with all this other stuff. We want somebody else to do it for us. I'm guilty of that myself. I mean, I'm a creative person. I don't paint, but I write, and I am always creating things, and that's my happy place. But I do have a suggestion. So when there's something really important that you're working on, something that you think is going to be popular, used commercially, or go big, file a copyright for that. Like if you have 100 things that you need to copyright or you're worried about and it's stressing you out, just pick 1 or 2 things. Like my book, the book I wrote, Art, Money, Success, I copyrighted my book and it actually was not that, it's simple when you copyright one thing. And you can, if you have a piece of art that is really popular, copyright that one piece of art, pay that $55 for the published copyright fee, and then you don't have to worry about that one anymore. And maybe that's just how you get started. You just file 1 or 2 copyrights just to kind of get familiar with it.
Hey, I will say this. There's nothing cooler than when you get the actual registration. They're starting to go to some digital stuff. But some digital. But when you get that little cert online, or they get that little cert in the mail, you're like, woohoo! Even I get excited. Sometimes, I'll get. I think the most we've ever had in the office at one day was 300 and some when they come with a little mail tote. But even if it's just 1. And the good news is with templates, once you understand what you're claiming, you just start small.
Yeah.
That's
chipping away, as Donnie's boss says.
Yeah.
Chipping away is the best approach. Yeah, just start with one. Just start with one. That's it. Just do one. One filing, pick your 1 or 5 most popular images or popular pieces and start there. And then at least you can sleep better at night knowing that your most popular ones are protected.
And by the way, like you said, if you make a mistake or if you don't file correctly, you don't submit something correctly, you didn't check the right box, you've got a group of professionals at the Copyright Office I'll tell you, they're good at what they do, and they're usually much more nicer to you than they are to me, although they're very nice to me, and they'll help you. There's a whole division about education. That, if you called in before you even registered and had that question.
I've called the Copyright Office, and they're always helpful.
Yes.
And it's always surprising that you can get a human being on the phone. It's better than calling your bank, which you can't get a human on the phone.
Well, and so for full disclosure, I'm the chairperson for the American Bar Association Copyright Affairs Committee or whatever. So I work with those people, there. I'm telling you, they pride themselves. You can go to a section of the Copyright Office where they talk about how, how many people they help, what sort of resources. You have seasoned, dedicated professionals that want to make it work.
Well, good. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for helping us today. I learned a few new things. I always learn new things when I talk to you. Just when I thought I knew everything, then I learned something new. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the changes that you're helping the Copyright Office make, and I hope that the process for artists gets easier. And really looking forward to positive changes there. And for all of you listening, if you want to learn more about Tammy, in the description of this video, there is a link. I put a link to her website. And what is your website, Tammy?
artsandcraftslaw.com. artsandcraftslaw.com.
Got it.
Or it's real easy. My email is Tammy@browning-smith.com. So it's my name. I assure you, I will tell you if I'm going to charge you, but well in advance. We'd much rather get you the educational information you need. Maybe you're going to ask me a question and Maria is going to be the best to get you there. But please feel free to reach out. That's why I do it. That's just so.
That's very generous of you, and I appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you so much, Tammy, and thanks everybody for being on.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all next time.